Hello everyone, Ryan Hoover with Handgun Hunters International here. I'm going to go over the SSK-50 frame. I have one here that SSK was kind enough to donate to one of our Handgun Hunters International giveaways. This one has our logo on both sides. I was graciously allowed by the winner to hang on to it to do a little testing and hunting with it. I have really enjoyed using it. I have been using this instead of my contender you see behind me lately to go hunting with this 730 Waters barrel, my favorite barrel, and I've really been enjoying it. Okay, so this configuration is how I've had it set up. A couple of things I'm going to go over in this video are what fits, what doesn't fit, what I like about it, what's a miss, what's a hit, opinions and facts. And I'm going to show you how to adjust the trigger. I got a few things around here that I'll show you what does and doesn't fit on here. And I'm going to answer a few questions that I was asked on the HHI forum as well. First, I want to go over just a couple of quick things. This is pretty much a clone made with wonderful materials of the Generation 1, the G1 Contender. This frame is made like an easy open contender frame. And what that means is that pretty much all of the things that you're used to on a G1 Contender will be true with this. It opens by by pulling on the trigger guard, and it closes, and the hammer, once you cock the hammer, you do have to open and close the barrel in order to cock the hammer again. So if you cock the hammer back and then you let the hammer down, easy like that, you cannot cock the hammer again until you open the barrel and close it and then cock the hammer. So that's a similar feature, exactly like the original Contenders were. Nothing wrong with that. A couple of things that I've been hearing are, well, some barrels don't fit. Well, the truth is some barrels don't fit all contender frames. In the early days of Thompson Center, the early 70s, they went through several iterations and they didn't always mark or make a note of it. And so I was told by Brian Alberts at SSK that SSK is telling people that some of those early barrels, some of the 10-inch octagon barrels, the flat lug barrels, won't fit on these frames very well. And I've found that to be true. And I have 8 contender barrels and a couple of them don't fit. I'm going to go over what happens, what to do when they don't fit. But SSK is also helping people out on that front. Okay, my first impressions of these, I really loved it. The trigger pull is fantastic. It adjusts. It has a trigger stop right here on the rear of the trigger guard. It has a trigger adjustment screw on the top of the trigger here. It's easy to adjust. This one came just fine for me. I'm going to measure it here in just a second and we'll see what it is on camera. But I've been successful with this thing. I shot a nice buck with it, and I shot a pig with it, and I've been to the range with it, and I've really enjoyed it, and I think this is a really good analog to a G1 Contender. Before I get into some of what fits and doesn't fit on this frame, I just want to be clear. This is the only frame I have. This is the only frame I have had. This is the only one I've had a chance to look at, to shoot, to review. So having been in the gun business for a long time, there is no such thing as a perfect production run. Every single item, every single gun is going to have a couple of stinkers in it. It's just the way it goes. Things slip by, and it's all down to how the company responds when they got to fix something. So I think, just to let you know, I'm not saying that this is true for every single SSK-50 frames, and I've read about all kinds of diverse experiences out there. But for everything I tell you is about this specific 4-digit serial number frame that SSK donated to HHI for our giveaway. Okay, I have 2 frames here. On my left is the SSK-50, and on my right is my personal older TC frame. This one is a pre-easy open in the 16900,000 serial range. The similarities, I mean, they are very, very nearly identical. If you hold them up next to each other, their dimensions are very similar. They pretty much match up. The SSK-50 frame and the TC frame work almost exactly the same. Not almost, they work exactly the same. The way that the barrel fits on, the opening and closing of the gun, cocking the hammer, the easy open frames that had the top hammer selector switch on them. That's how the SSK-50 frame works. If you have it in the center, it's on safe. If you rotate it clockwise, it's on center fire, and counterclockwise, it's on rim fire. It's clearly marked on the hammer with a C and R. This is a stainless frame with different I don't know if these are blued or probably nitrided components, the non-stainless components. It's just a well-made, well-thought-out piece. And if you compare two frames side by side, you can just see, oh, there's that piece, and everything is pretty much the same. Okay, I'm going to go over some of the things I've heard about what fits, some of the things I've heard about what don't fit, my experience has been fitting things to the SSK-50, what I have to hand to be able to test on it so that you can get some answers here. These are definitely things that I have actually done, and that made it sound like those are things that I haven't actually done, didn't it? I have a bunch of different components and accessories to try on this that I have tried on this. However, I've also heard stories from other people who had these, some good, some bad, some this didn't work, some that didn't work. And so I'm just going to go over all that. First, I have to try 8 different barrels. These are all Thompson Center factory manufactured barrels. Out of those 8 barrels, only 2 did not fit. Now, according to SSK, they were having trouble with the early TC frames fitting. So the non-stepped lug frames, the flat lug frames, or the single piece bolt frames. For those of you who don't know, there are a couple of types of barrels. This is a very early 10-inch tapered octagon 357 barrel, and you can see that the bottom of this lug is completely flat except for this little angle at the front. So from here to there is completely flat. If you look at this little bit later manufactured bull barrel, this is a 22K Hornet barrel, that you can see that there's a little step right here. So that's a stepped lug, and the other one is a flat lug. The bolt, which is the piece on the bottom of the barrel that locks it in the gun, they made these in 2 different styles. One of them is and if I'm correct, I think I'm correct, the earlier ones were a single piece, and the later ones were a 2-piece bolts. The SSK-50 frame has had some issues fitting with with 1-piece locking bolts and the flat lug barrels, the early barrel lugs. According to Brian Alberts at SSK, TC made several different changes in the early 70s in their manufacturing. They didn't really keep a record of what went where, so there's no guarantee of if you have this serial number, it's going to be that, etc., etc. So it's just kind of hit or miss when it comes to these early TC frames. I do know that obviously SSK is saying that all of their frames will fit SSK-50 frame. Excuse me. All of their barrels, rather, would fit SSK-50 frames, and I assume that that's true. I have heard that MGM barrels, some of them have had issues. MGM even says on their website now that their barrels aren't guaranteed to fit the SSK-50 frame. I don't have any MGM barrels or Bullberry barrels or EABCO barrels or what's the other one? Bergara or I can't think of the other one. I've gone blank. Anyway, I don't have any of those other companies' aftermarket barrels to try on the SSK-50 frame. But here's the deal with that. Not all barrels fit all TC frames. I mean, we know, a good example is the Armor Alloy series where they were plated before they started making stainless frames. You know, everybody says that a lot of Armor Alloy barrels won't fit blued steel guns because the plating increased the thickness to the point to where they wouldn't fit. Now, there was an Armor Alloy and an Armor Alloy 2, and you know the truth is that there were thousands upon thousands of these guns made, and hundreds of thousands, and there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of barrels out there. So it is perfectly reasonable to expect that not every barrel is going to fit every frame. So yeah, that's my opinion on it, mixed in with some facts. Okay, another thing that I have heard about these frames is that the Pachmayr grips don't fit in that the front piece of the grip here, that bendy piece that would be above your middle finger as you're holding it, it interferes with the trigger guard when you pull it to open the barrel. I've had this on this gun. I haven't had that issue. As a matter of fact, I have this Pachmayr grooved finger. I have this older Gen 1 TC grip with the thumb rest and the cat engraved on the bottom. And I have the one that I use the most, which is this newer style wooden grip with the rubber insert on the back. All of those fit the SSK-50 frame with no issues, either in fitting on the frame itself or the gun functioning while they're on the gun. I also have several forends. I have this forend for a Super 14. I have this forend for a 10-inch, and I have this forend for a 10-inch. Or shorter, and I have this Pachmayr forend. They all fit just fine too. You're really only concerned about them fitting up against the frame like that as well. So that is my experience again with this frame and all of these grips and forends that I have. They've all fit just fine. This, I want to repeat, is a Gen 1 contender frame clone. The SSK-50 is designed to take barrels from the Gen 1, the G1 contender. It is not a G2 contender. It is not an Encore frame. It is not an Encore Pro Hunter frame. It is none of those. So this cannot take 300 Win Mag barrels. This cannot take 30-06 barrels. This is contender barrels only. It's made out of modern materials using modern techniques, and it is a fantastic frame, but don't try to get it to do what it wasn't designed to do. I also got a question about if it's harder to open with max reloads when you start shooting maximum pressure. I'm not a max pressure guy. I reload my 730, and I've been shooting that in here. I don't think I've been half a grain under the max load for that. I haven't had any problems with it opening. I haven't had any flattened or backing out primers. I assume because of the high quality steel this is made out of, that it's going to be able to do just fine with anything that would be chambered in a standard contender. But I can't speak to whether or not if you try and hot rod it, does it get hard to open. I'm not a hot rodder. Okay, I want to talk about stuck barrels on these frames, and this also applies to a TC Easy Open frame as well, so it's not just SSK-50. But first, before I do, I am not endorsed by SSK. I did not receive these instructions from SSK. Nobody's told me that this is the way to do it. Was just a gunsmith for 15 years, had to work on guns all the time, and so I'm using my experience to kind of just show you how I would do this. And it's a very simple process that I believe if you can switch a barrel, it's just like half a step above that complexity. Okay, so again, disclaimer, I'm not representing anybody but me. So what we're going to do is, I know that this barrel, this 10-inch 357 barrel, does get stuck on this frame, so I'm going to install it with the hinge pin here. Okay, once I close this, now this is easier to do to test to make sure that you can't get it off with your grips on there, but I could tell that barrel was harder to close, and if I squeeze it, it just does not want to open. So what's happened is that the lugs that are on the bottom of the barrel are sticking over the shelf, and when you push down on the trigger guard, it's just not pushing the lugs far enough forward to allow the barrel to come up. Now, if this happens, you do have to disassemble part of the gun part way in order to get this out. But fortunately, this is an incredibly easy gun to disassemble. Let me walk you through it. So the first thing we're going to want to do is remove this screw at the back of the trigger guard that holds the spring that the trigger guard, that you feel spring tension on when you pull the trigger guard. That screw holds that spring there. So let's take that screw out first. Brownell screwdrivers, I love you. Brownell screwdrivers, I love you. Okay, so take out that screw there. Now, using my handy dandy bench block, I'm going to drive out the pin that is right above the trigger here. Now, when you do this, this spring is going to cause it to kind of be pushing out. which is totally fine. It's not really like a 1911 spring that's going to shoot up into the ceiling, but still, just maintain positive control on it at all times, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, so just drive this pin out. And I'm going to kind of push back and down to get the trigger and trigger guard mechanism out. This is an awesome self-contained unit. You don't have to worry. I mean, I wouldn't throw it across the room, but you don't have to worry about it coming apart in your hands. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the hinge pin out, and it's going to be under a little bit of tension just because the locking bolt is pressing up against the shelf in the frame. But yeah, let's do that. Okay. Now, flip the gun over and look underneath it. And you'll be able to just put a screwdriver in there, pry those locking lugs forward, and pull it off. Like that. Easy day. And to reassemble the reverse, you don't need the hinge pin. Stick that spring into the back of the receiver there. Push your trigger guard back in. Make sure that spring is underneath the slot in the rear of the trigger guard. And push it in. Line it up. Okay, put the screw back in. Just tighten that screw down until it's snug. And there you go. You're back together. Easy as that. Okay, now I want to talk really quickly about the trigger here. So this, in comparison to an older TC frame, has an extra screw. Right on the back of the trigger guard is the screw that is adjusted for the stop, so how far the trigger is pulled back before it just stops. You want that adjusted to where the trigger breaks but doesn't have a lot of over travel afterwards. It's called the over travel screw as well. And then there's an adjustment screw on the bottom of the trigger as well. These are really good additions by SSK. However, SSK says in their manual that they don't give instructions for it, and they say it needs to be done by a qualified gunsmith. So I know that's a little bit of what you find in modern gun manuals. However, you know, it's just like the car. They don't tell you the timing, how to change the timing belt on your car anymore in the manuals either. But these come adjusted from the factory, they say, but those are what those screws do. Let me show you. I have my trigger pull gauge here, and we'll just check the trigger pull on this. One of the great things about these guns, as well as the contenders, is that you don't have to cock the hammer to test the trigger pull because of the trigger system. So I'm going to turn on my handy dandy trigger gauge, and we'll take some real-time trigger measurements here and see what this thing measures. 2.98. 2.60. 2.43. Okay, on these guns, when you measure the trigger pull, you'll get a different poundage depending on where you put the trigger pull gauge on the trigger. I mean, it is a lever after all. I have found this trigger to be eminently shootable. I know some people like lighter triggers. As an example, on my older frame, the trigger pull is a little under 2 pounds, so it is a little lighter. However, this trigger pull is very crisp. The having the ability to set it with the over travel screw, I mean, I know you have that on the original contender frames as well, is just really nice. It's really nice, and I have not had any issues with shooting this trigger, even though it's not quite as light as my original contender is. Okay, we had to wait a long time for the SSK-50 frame, and I get it. Having been in the manufacturing world when I was younger, it is not fun to be reliant on other people to supply you with pieces or parts of something you're trying to manufacture for the public. On top of that, supply chain issues and blah, 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 blah through COVID that everybody had to deal with set them back a ways. I can just say I'm a fan of SSK. I am a fan, especially of Brian Alberts, the general manager of SSK. He is a shooter's shooter. He has got our best interest at heart, and he is working hard to do what is right for the handgun hunting community and the shooting community as well. So I am very pleased that they're rolling out these frames. I think, every single new product has some sort of little hiccup in it, and they got to work the bugs out, right? So I would hope that us as a hunting community, as a handgun hunting community, as a shooting community in general, will give them the benefit of the doubt. Let them fix any problems they have, be patient with them, and continue to support them, because really us sticking with them through this is going to be the key to this being a long-term product. Now, I know that may sound like I'm an SSK sycophant. It's not the truth. The truth is that I want to hang on as tightly as we can to any product that benefits the handgun hunting community, because these days, let's face it, we see a lot more of our favorite products leave the market than enter the market. And anything we can do to support even the smaller companies that are trying to get things out with fits and starts is worth it, because we need it. We need these kinds of things to be available to us as handgun hunters. So I just, recommend you get yourself one, get on the list, find one if you can, and shoot it and enjoy it. If you have issues, SSK is helping people out. They're sending out parts to correct things. They are taking, I heard they're taking frames for being fixed. They'll be, if you send it in. And from everybody I've heard that's had to send a frame in, they did get it returned, and it was working just fine when they got it back. So I assume whatever the issue is, it was an easy fix. And so, yeah, I hope we can support them. Okay, I want to know what you think about the SSK-50 frame. Are you on a wait list? How long have you waited? I want to know the good, bad, the ugly. If you have one, what has your experience been? Everything from a difference in accuracy between your factory contenders and your SSK-50s to barrels that fit, barrels that don't fit, how you like the trigger, how you like the mechanism, everything about it. So please comment on this video or reach out to us at Handgun Hunters International. And we just thank you for your support. Thank you for watching this video. If you like it and you think we deserve it, please just throw us a like, a subscribe, comment on the video here. Our videos and our content and our entire organization exists to support and grow the handgun hunting community. That's what we do. That's why we're here, and we're very grateful for all of you. So good hunting, and thank you very much for watching.